So that's a big question. What is anxiety? A lot of people think anxiety is fear, but anxiety is really fear of fear.
So if you want to deal with your anxiety from the comfort of your own home, this video is going to make that really, really simple. We're going to give you all of the tips, strategy, and know-how in order to manage your anxiety better and live the life that you deserve to live. This is also a great companion if you're seeking your own therapy with your therapist. Even if you're seeing one of us, you can go back home and check through all of the tips, tools, and techniques that we're wanting you to learn.
It's important to bring up, actually, following that, Georgia, that anxiety is managed. So even when clients successfully finish their anxiety treatment, that does not guarantee they will never have anxiety again, but that they will know what to do. So if you're having a bad day, it's a great time to take out one of these video clips and review your strategies. We're all only as good as our strategies.
Right. Even when I go back through, and I know these techniques really, really well, but sometimes I go back through, we go through training every single week, and I go back and say, you know what, this is really, really important. So we're going to walk you all through it. Hopefully it'll be fun and enjoyable and help you living your life.
So what we always start with when a client comes in the offices is really explaining what is anxiety, which again is fear of fear. So there's an anticipatory aspect of anxiety. So that's how you know the difference. So fear is adaptive. Example, if someone barges into this office now with a gun, I need to be afraid. If a wolf is coming at you in the forest, you need to be afraid. But if you're thinking, what if this person doesn't like me, or what if I don't get to my destination, you're anticipating a fear. And that is anxiety. So Georgia and I are going to talk about what happens to the body when you start having these what if thoughts. Have you had one of those what if thoughts? We have a strategy for you on that as well. So we're going to look at the systems, the nervous systems in the body. I'm going to start off by talking about the sympathetic nervous system. Georgia's going to be talking to you about the parasympathetic nervous system and how they play out when you're having an anxiety attack. What are the tips and tricks to resolve conflicts? Where do we start from?
So this one I love. We've mentioned it on so many of the DVDs, so you probably kind of expect us to say this one. And that is pause and take a moment to breathe. Now, why would I say that, Sandra?
Well, like you said, we've said it on many DVDs, but when we have an emotional response to something, we often get what's called flooded in the brain, and our thinking part of our brain literally shuts down and we go into fight or flight, which is literally you want to kill someone or you want to run away. So taking that pause allows the thinking part of the brain to turn back on. So we need the time. You want to catch a breath there to make sure you're not too reactive.
Right. And we have a rule, which is during this point of time, if you're really flooded, really upset, you don't talk to the person yet. Try not to email. Don't give them a phone call yet. Wait until that feeling of anxiety or flooding goes down. If you have to, write it down so you don't forget your points. But you want to make sure that you discuss this when you're at your best. If you have to, write your points down on a piece of paper. And when you're feeling calmer, that's when you can discuss it.
I think this is a game changer, this one. I really do. And, you know, we're talking about different personality styles. I'm more the type who likes to resolve an argument quickly. So for me, learning to pause was a challenge at first, but it really helps me to assess whether I'm being reactive, or if it's triggering something from my past, or if it's something I really need to talk to the other person about. And we know that when we're calm, if I sit down in a corporate situation, in a business situation, in a personal situation, if I start then going, Georgia, I'm a little upset, I need to talk to you, is quite different than a reactive like, how could you do that? Which is probably not going to produce the result you want. So I couldn't stress enough how important your strategy is to take a pause. What about anxiety and fear, Georgia?
Oof. Anxiety and fear is multi-level to that. It really is our warning system. This is our protection system. So when we go through anxiety, you might feel it might even come out as anger, because anger and fear. So fear would more be an avoidance. I want to get away. I don't feel safe. I need something different to that. Anxiety is a real important defensive mechanism. It doesn't feel good. We often don't like to talk about it. I think that's why a lot of people are really shy to come in to be able to deal with anxiety, because they don't feel comfortable. They think that this is a weakness. But really it's a strength. It's highly
huge
adaptive.
Strength. Yeah.
And it's there to tell us that we don't feel safe. It's like our spider sense. Something isn't up.
Right.
And we need to figure out what exactly is that.
So what should we do? What is the antidote?
Well, the first thing would be, instead of avoid, we always say try not to avoid, but listen. What is it saying? What are you uncomfortable with to that? Because what happens if you avoid your anxieties?
The anxiety gets stronger. So it's really a call for safety, and maybe the strategy would be looking for safety behaviors that are not avoidance, but more self-soothing, and more dealing with, why do you feel fear? Because sometimes fear is extremely adaptive. You could be in danger.
Yes.
And sometimes it's anxiety, which, if you've been following us, you know is fear of fear, which is not so adaptive.
And that's a great point to why emotional intelligence is so important, because people often ask, how do I know the difference between when I should avoid something and when I shouldn't? When you're cued into that, then you'll know when I should really avoid something versus when I should go forward. I'm scared because I'm worried of failing at this. Well, then that's something that I might be ready to be able to go forward and deal with, versus I'm scared because I don't want to fall off of the cliff. Then I might say, you know what? If I'm too close to a cliff and there's no ledge on that, I might want to pull back a little bit. Sometimes feeling fear is also saying there really is a danger here and you want to listen to that. I don't feel safe with this person. Would be a great time to say, you know what? Maybe you should listen to that sound.
Right. Before we go forward with consequences, let's take a pause on that for people listening, because would it be a fair statement? I think the answer is yes, but I want to check with you. You treat a lot of parents and a lot of kids. Would it be fair to say that one of the biggest problems, if not the biggest problem that shows up in our clinic for parenting and children not behaving in the way that parents would like, has to do with boundaries and consequences?
It's the first thing that I find out whenever I have, and we have a parenting DVD, so this is one of the issues that you may want to go through. You can go and take a look at the parenting DVD in our special series, but it's one of the first things that we go through. And I think that the same thing for you, the same thing for relationships.
Yes.
It's the same thing. So when you have a parental relationship and there are no boundaries, I have kind of many people that are on one side or the other. Right now there's a lot of people with no boundaries and no consequences in their household. And so what ends up happening is children with a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of people upset in the home.
Excuse me, why does it cause anxiety in children? No boundaries? Why does it? I know it does. Why?
Yes, it does. Well, because there are no rules. There is no safety. As you had mentioned before, there's no safety in the home because there are no rules. And the child then says, well, if the parent cannot make sure that this home is going to be safe and whatever is a rule will be enforced, then how safe am I? And if a child suddenly has to take on a parental role to defend themselves, they're going to feel really worried and upset. If bad things happen to you outside and you see people, going through a stop sign and a policeman is never doing that, you would be upset as well with that. And so I think that also a lot of anger and resentment on not having a safe, relaxed, calm home also comes into play.
True blue cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on the here and now. At the clinic, we've taken a combination of here and now and combined it with the past, and we have found that's the magical formula. To understand your past, as I said, is to not repeat it. As Georgia said, is not to be bathed in it and keep playing those same rules over and over again. It also allows you to make connections. For example, if you've been raised in a family where victimization was encouraged, example, you have problems in your life, you get attention from your parents. Unconsciously, you will continue to have problems in your life to get attention.
It's also a wonderful thing that when you figure out the issues in your past and how they affect your behavior now, it's also wonderful to know that it's not just you, it's different things that happen to you. So it's a wonderful way of understanding that I can manage this and I am not set in my ways of not being able to change anything.
That brings up the amazing topic of neuroplasticity, which is the fact that we know now that brains can be changed. And so if I've grown up in an environment of fear and what ifs, which we're going to talk about, and all the things that can go wrong, and now my life has become a series of what ifs and what can go wrong, I can, as Georgia so beautifully said, learn to change the way my brain thinks. I cannot do that without looking at my history. I absolutely need to look at my history to understand what are these patterns. It also is a way of not catching what I like to call the hot potato, the contagion effect. Contagion effect. Come from a family with anxiety in it? I know I did. Okay, if there's anxiety around you, the hot potato will be thrown at you. What does that mean? Someone anxious wants to diffuse their anxiety. They will throw a hot potato at you. There are many ways of doing this. One is the obvious way, like catching a cold. I'm around someone anxious, I'm going to get anxious. Some are not as direct. Repressed emotions, the one we're very interested in, is anger. Repressed anger is highly linked with anxiety. That segues nicely into the concept of self-love. And a lot of times depressed people have started to forget themselves and stop loving themselves. And that is also a good recipe for depression. So a lot of these acts like staying in bed, not eating, not exercising are acts of self-hatred. So you got to ask the question, are you right now doing enough acts of self-love, or are you mainly doing acts of self-hatred? And be honest about it.
Well, I think that a lot of people would say, well, I'm not doing anything. I'm not really accomplishing anything. I've let my job go to waste. I'm not pursuing the dreams that I should have. How could I love myself when I'm not doing anything that I deserve to be loved for?
I think that's such a great question. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the years that's so important to get out there is that your lovability factor is not determined by your external accomplishments.
Oh, I love that. Can you say that again? I love
your
that.
Your lovability factor is not determined by your external accomplishments. You were born lovable, you were lovable, you are lovable, and you will be lovable.
Even me.
Even you, Georgia. Okay? So if you do great accomplishments, good for you, but you didn't become more lovable. Sorry. And if you became really rich and everybody in the world is clapping for you, that's great, but you didn't become more lovable. So if it's a constant, that means you're lovable right now.
Yes. And when do you most need to be loved? When you're doing great things, when you're climbing mountains, accomplishing things, that's not actually when it matters most to be cared for. It's when you're down, when it really matters, when you feel upset. That's when you need to be a real good coach to yourself, to pick yourself up, to make yourself feel better. You don't need it when you're winning off that marathon for someone to say, good job, you're doing great. You already know that. So that's the most important time to make sure you're giving yourself good self-care.
Tense the muscles in your arms and hands as tightly as you possibly can without getting yourself into too much pain, just tension. That being said, squeeze a little harder, harder. Hold the tension in your arms, shoulders, and hands. Feel the tension in those muscles. Feel what it feels like to feel tension. Hold it for just a few more seconds. And now slowly, very slowly, release the muscles. Let the muscles of your shoulders, arms, and hands relax and go limp. Notice the relaxation as your shoulders lower into a comfortable position and feel restfully relax. Notice your hands relax at your sides. Allow the muscles all along your arms to relax completely. Feel the difference between tension and what it is to be restfully relaxed. Check in again with your breathing. Slow, even, regular breaths. I'm breathing in relaxation. I'm breathing out stress and tension. I'm breathing in relaxation. I'm breathing out stress and tension. Continue to breathe slowly and surely. I'm breathing in relaxation. I'm breathing out stress and tension. The issue of if there's no rules in the house, how it would cause anxiety. Now, you brought up something very important also, that helicopter parenting will also cause anxiety. So I think just to make sure that this is clear to anyone listening, basically, if I, just an overview of it is, if there's no rules in the house, there's going to be anxiety. And if there's hovering, there's going to be anxiety. So I think what you're saying is that both those kinds of sets of parenting are going to cause anxiety in kids.
Yes.
Is that what you mean?
Yes, they
Okay.
do. And I guess it's important to go through what's the difference between them.
Yeah.
What happens when there are no rules to the house is that children, one, feel that they don't understand how the world works. And when they end up going out and getting a job, they're really upset when someone has suddenly docked them pay for showing up late. It hasn't taught them that the world is a safe place either, because they feel like if there's no rules, who is going to protect them? And so it also gives them an unrealistic feeling of how to deal with the world in and of itself.
Would you say, I think you would, that the anxiety manifests even before they get out in the real world? And in the household, a house without rules is an anxiety-provoking place for a child.
Yes, yes. Well, think about what would happen if, someone bullies you or teases you and nothing bad happens to it. I have a lot of very angry, anxiety and anger are inversely related to each other, but I have a lot of very angry children because someone's teasing them or someone's hurt them, and I say, well, what happened because of that? And they'll say, nothing happened. And it makes them also feel abandoned, that they're not cared enough so that someone would step in when they need someone to.
Isn't that interesting? That a child actually feels cared about when you can be bothered to put a consequence in. I think that's such an important point. Mm-hmm. Who would ever think of that? Who would ever think that that's a way of feeling cared about? But it actually is. So I think that's really valid. So there's two sets of parenting that really cause anxiety in children. There's the laissez-faire, no rules.
Yes.
And then there's the other one, which is the helicoptering. This is such an important point globally about ego strength. Another thing that will come up in later tapes, as you go through your process, you'll want to know more and more about the journey of evolvement. And people with good, what we call in psychology, ego strength, who feel really good about themselves, know the 80-20 rule. They don't take things so personally, and they don't jump to conclusions, and they don't mind read, and many of these other distortions. So it's funny. It's so funny because you could learn about anxiety treatment and actually learn so much more than anxiety treatment. Is actually you'll learn a way of life, a happier, more peaceful, feeling good way of life. Because if you don't take things personally and if you're not mind reading and many of the other distortions, you generally will feel happier, not only without anxiety.
Yes, beautifully said.
Okay, let's move on to the next distortion.
So next we're going to go through magnification. And so that is when you take something and then you make that magnified by 1,000% or maybe just 50% more than what it really would be. So say that I fail a test in school and then I say, you know what, my career is ruined. I'm never going to get to do anything that I want, and I've now destroyed all my dreams. You want to be able to not magnify things beyond what they need to be. Again, we want things to be within proportion. Life is about the bumps in the road. Everyone has bumps in the road, and it's how you're going to deal with them, not if you have them or not.
So true. Okay, our next distortion is emotional reasoning. Now, this is a very interesting one. This is when you take a feeling and you make it a fact. So feelings are not facts. Now, feelings are valid, but they're not facts. So if I feel sad, you can't tell me not to feel sad because I feel sad. But if I said I'm feeling heavy today, that does not mean factually that I'm heavy. If I say I feel like a loser, that does not mean I am a loser.
Right.
So that's one thing about emotional reasoning, is you have to keep in mind that what you're feeling is not factual, it's a feeling. So like the clouds, it will pass. Hi, my name is Sandra Reich. I'm the clinical director of the Montreal Centre for Anxiety and Depression, and I'm here again with top psychotherapist Georgia Dow. This is our first DVD in our special series, an adjunct to our anxiety video series called Special Topics. Due to popular demand, the first topic that came up is challenges with sleep. Sleep is a huge issue. Let's face it, your quality of life cannot be good if you don't have quality of sleep. So in today's video, we're going to go through what's called sleep hygiene. How do you get a good night's sleep? What are the challenges you're having, and how do we overcome them?
Sleep is probably one of the biggest issues that my clients come to me with having a difficulty of overcoming. They often say that they're not getting enough sleep, or they wake up through the night, or they're having a lot of difficulty going to bed. And it was probably one of the biggest challenges that I went through myself. I think that a lot of our sleep habits happen in childhood.
It's very true. I mean, I can think of a very simple example. My parents, very well-meaning, created a very, very sterile environment, no noise of any kind. And guess what? I can't sleep unless there's no noise of any kind. Whereas my daughter has grown up where there's chaos in the house with lots of noise, lots of activity, and she can sleep anywhere. And I really wish, I'm envious of her. She can sleep anywhere, any place.
And for me, I think that for mine, it was more of a control issue. My father says, okay, you have to go to sleep at this time. And I was like, I don't want to go to sleep at this time. I want to stay up because I was a night owl. And so I think that that caused a lot of difficulty because I ended up having this apprehension towards sleep, whereas, you know, there's nothing to do, everything's quiet. And then my mind started racing with cycling thoughts, and it was difficult for me to learn how to calm down, get into a good habit, and then get into a better sleep habit.
You just brought up some really important things to lead us right in. So why is sleep important?
Whew, this is a huge area. We used to believe, long ago, we used to believe that sleep was for the lazy, right? I don't know if that's what your parents thought. It was like, if you're sleeping, you're not doing things, and you can actually do more if you're not sleeping. But it's really interesting because all mammals must sleep. It is essential for our health and well-being, and it's only recently that we've done studies, we actually understand a little bit of why sleep is so important. They actually did studies on puppies, and they forced them not to be able to sleep at all. I'm sorry, I know this is bad, but they didn't know that this would happen, but the puppies died from not sleeping at all.
Yes, there's no question. They also talk about that I think it's 72 hours you start being delusional as a human being from not sleeping.